Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studio. These are our top stories. The World Health Organization condemns Israeli attacks on its Gaza staff amid escalating violence. Speculations into the Air India crash continue as the airline says fuel switch inspections on its Boeing fleet found no faults. The Epstein Files, the US Department of Justice say that they will meet with co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell in prison in the coming days. And music legend Ozzy Osbourne has sadly passed away at the age of 76. His family say he died surrounded by love. The World Health Organization has condemned a series of attacks on its staff and facilities in Gaza, calling the situation appalling and demanding protection for humanitarian workers. This comes as the UK warns of further sanctions on Israel after airstrikes in Deir al-Balah killed dozens of Palestinians seeking food. 28 countries have now jointly urged Israel to lift the aid restrictions, but Israel's foreign ministry dismissed the joint statement as disconnected from reality. And the US Ambassador, Mike Huckabee, has called it disgusting. Earlier, I spoke to NRC Middle East spokesperson Ahmed Bayram, who told me just how dangerous things are now for the aid workers on the ground in Gaza.
We have seen different faces of these kind of attacks against aid workers and aid organizations. Don't forget, Israel has killed the largest number of aid workers anywhere in conflict in the world, and it continues to systematically dismantle the aid system. The attack on WHO, before that the attack on WFP convoys, and before that the many incidents, including attacks on food convoys. They all speak to the same problem here, is that Israel's free reign over Gaza has, I would say, has blurred any lines that exist in conflict, have basically thrown against the wall the values of humanitarian work, the values of humanity.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, we're joined by Freddy, Deputy Editor of Spectator, who joins us from the Isle of Wight, and also joined by broadcaster and journalist Isabel Webster, who's in Surrey in the UK. Thank you both for joining us. First of all, Freddy, let's turn to you. The WHO is weighing in. It says its facilities are now under attack, and this is confirmed. We have heard Hamas echo this before, but it seems to have fallen on deaf ears previously. But a statement like this coming from the WHO, is that likely to make people pay attention, do you think?
Well, one might hope so, but perhaps not, because the WHO have made quite a few statements that have been pretty critical of Israel in the last 20 or so months. And they haven't really moved the dial so much. I do think it's changing a little bit now, because it seems like the WHO, which is a UN-backed agency, a UN agency, I should say, are claiming to be directly attacked themselves. And I think if these attacks become more severe in the coming days, there's a sort of bubbling climate of international condemnation. We're seeing various countries doing it. We saw 25 countries do it yesterday, just saying that a ceasefire needs to happen now and that Israel's behavior is unacceptable. The real country that will make a difference is Donald Trump's America, and we are yet to see whether they will unequivocally intervene or condemn Israel. It sounds as though Donald Trump is unhappy with Netanyahu, but that doesn't necessarily mean the US will intervene. But without a US intervention, a substantial one, I don't see how Israel is stopped from doing what it wants to do.
And it does seem the US has been silent so far on this, but we're seeing the videos today that are heart-wrenching. Isabel, the levels of malnutrition, they've been critical for weeks now, if not months, but people are not really paying attention at an international level. Do people need to do more to enforce Israel to actually open up these aid channels?
I don't know what you mean by people. I mean, everybody I know is desperately sad and frustrated about what they are hearing and seeing coming out of Gaza, but they feel very, very helpless about what they as individuals can do. And it goes back to what Freddy was saying, even the British government here, pretty much impotent when it comes to changing the situation there, very much in the court of Donald Trump and the United States and their relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. But you're talking about those levels of malnutrition, and it certainly seems as though this is stepping up an even more serious level now. I think around 600,000 people in the region considered malnourished. But those reports today from the Gazan Hamas-run health ministry, I have to add, but there is obviously no other administration in that area, that 33 people had died from starvation today, among them 15 children. And when you think about the location of Gaza, right there on the Mediterranean, not far from British and many European holiday makers there in Cyprus or wherever it might be, enjoying a lovely time, and then children in 2025 dying of starvation, not because there is a shortage of food, but because of a man-made situation. It is absolutely devastating and abhorrent, but I really don't know what we as individuals can really do.
Freddy, Isabel said it there as well when she mentioned about the UK and their response. David Lammy said today, it's grotesque. Amnesty International are saying that that's empty words. And without any actual action, you can say as much as you want, but are you actually doing anything to help on the ground? And I think the answer seems to be from the UK government, no.
No, I think that is. I mean, it's almost been a sort of tacit understanding between the Israeli government and various Western governments that will say out loud that we don't approve and that we will tut-tut and wag our fingers because our electorates are very concerned about this issue. But we won't do anything substantial or strategic to imperil your manoeuvres. That seems to be, I think, in the last few days, there seems to be a growing amount of momentum behind people saying enough is enough. Netanyahu needs to be brought under control because he's essentially waging a multi-fronted war. And I think generally politicians in the West are realizing how angry their populations are about it. But again, even if without America coming in and saying we're going to stop giving you billions of dollars of weapons, we're going to stop unless you address the humanitarian situation, I don't think Israel is going to feel compelled to change its actions.
Isabel,
I should add at this point, sorry, Jono, I was just going to say that the IDF are still resolutely denying that they are blocking that aid. They're saying it is on the Gaza side and that it is actually a Hamas failure, and they don't accept any responsibility for the situation. So whilst there is that impasse on that viewpoint as well, and obviously that's not borne out by the evidence from the aid agencies, but, you know, it's a very difficult political situation to navigate.
And I think, and that's exactly it. And as you said, and you mentioned it, Isabel, it is a Hamas-led images that we've seen coming out in the stories that have come out. When it's the WHO who've said it, and the WHO are saying our staff are at risk right now, now we finally have something that's not just from Hamas. And that brings me on to this. The journalism and the lack of journalism that's been allowed in Gaza at the moment is surely up there with the atrocities as well. We are not getting a picture on the ground. If Israel really has nothing to hide and says, well, we're getting the aid into the country, surely there should be journalists on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. I mean, transparency is absolutely the best way to prove that you're not doing anything wrong. Internationally reputed news agencies should be there, bearing witness, showing the world what is really happening and not getting it through the prism of whoever is trying to gain in terms of their own agenda. That is the role of journalism. It's an absolute pillar to freedom. And of course, as journalists, all of us would absolutely, I'm sure, agree that the French foreign minister is absolutely right to call for international press access. I think it's a scandal, one of the many scandals of the region that we haven't been able to so far.
I mean, we're hearing that it's not safe at the moment on the ground, but it is a war zone. And many times journalists take their lives into their hands to go into these war zones and report on the story that the world needs to see. And I think something like the WHO and this may give us some onus on that. Before we move on, just very quickly, I wanted to pass to you, not to put all of the blame on the UK, but EU also have remained fairly quiet on this, Freddy. We've seen a few sanctions here and there, but no real hard and fast movements.
No, again, I mean, it's all about statements and finger wagging. And it's a strange kind of hypocrisy, I think, from the European governments and the British government and the Biden administration before Donald Trump came in. And it's a different dynamic, Donald Trump, but it was very much, we will publicly condemn you, but we will do nothing to actually stop you or threaten you. And that is the dynamic of this conflict at the moment, and it's not changing.
Freddy, Isabel, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story. Air India says its precautionary inspections on the locking mechanism of fuel-controlled switches on all of its Boeing 787 and its Boeing 737 aircraft in the fleet found no issue. It comes just days after a preliminary investigation into last month's Air India plane crash stated that the switches had shifted and flipped within seconds, starving both engines of fuel. Now, the London-bound plane subsequently crashed, killing 260 people. Earlier, I spoke to an aviation analyst, Fabrizio Poli, to ask what he believed was the most likely explanation for the aviation crash. Have a listen.
I would say it's probably 70% that it was pilot suicide, but then you need to ask yourself the question, well, why would he commit suicide? Apparently the captain, his mother had just passed away and he wanted to retire early and look after his father. So I'm not quite sure there if he was motivated to kill himself and 200 other people with him. The other option would be a malfunction of some sort on the aircraft that made both engines cut off. And the other one would be sabotage or a hack. Now, can this airplane be hacked? It can be hacked. It means that someone that's going to hack it has to be highly skilled. They have to have access to the aircraft on the ground, do what they need to do on the ground, and then be able to action that remotely. But if it's a hack or a sabotage, the question needs to be, well, why would someone hack or sabotage this aircraft? What's their motive?
Isabel, we're hearing many theories of this. What do you think is the most likely one from this Air India crash?
I mean, to be honest, my guess is as good as anybody's. I don't know any more than anybody else. And I think, you know, speculation is always rife after a crash like this. But the fact that, you know, somebody survived, just one person as well, has made this, you know, a bit of a media feeding frenzy. We may never know as well. There is also that possibility. I think all avenues have to be explored. I think the fact that, you know, we're reading reports from the media in India that perhaps there had been a number of issues logged with that specific aircraft, that is concerning. I think the fact that the medical records are now being poured over into the captain, I believe his mother had died a couple of years ago and he was planning to leave the airline. This is according to the Telegraph I was reading, was planning on leaving the airline in order to take care of his elderly father. You know, this may be an invasion of his privacy, and, you know, we can debate the ethics of whether or not we should be discussing it all. But the reality is those things need to be examined to better understand what happened. But these cockpit recordings certainly give the impression that the pilot of the plane seemed strangely calm, whilst his co-pilot seemed to be a little more alarmed by what happened. That being said, he did make that Mayday alarm call, as was protocol. So perhaps, you know, it is unfair to try and read anything in, because of course the quality also wasn't fantastic on that cockpit recording. So, you know, who knows? It could, as you say, also have been a hack. Let's hope that all the investigations are thoroughly carried out, so that all of the victims' families, let's remember, that's what this is all about. You know, all of those who've lost lives in this can have those answers to those questions.
Indeed, we'll dig in a bit more into the quality of the audio that we heard in a few minutes as well, Isabel. But Freddy, Boeing, I mean, they didn't need something like this, something questioning their aircraft as well. It has been disproven categorically that it's not an across-the-board issue with the Dreamliner and that series of aircraft, but still an absolute PR nightmare for Boeing to have to deal with right now.
An absolute PR nightmare, and they're having more Air India problems to deal with in the last few days. Two faults, I think, have come up. But, I mean, it does seem as though in this particular case, something went wrong so far, again, like as Isabel said, neither of us are aviation experts, and even the aviation experts don't know, so we shouldn't really comment. But it does seem as though something unusual happened in the piloting of the flight. I don't think we should call it suicide, though. It's really mass murder. Even if he was intending to take his own life, he happened to take quite a few others too. So I would say we should call it murder rather than suicide.
Yeah, I mean, we have had situations like this in the past before. It's not the first time that we've heard of a pilot taking the lives of everybody on board down with them. I do, before we have to move on, there's an Air India statement on this as well. And the latest from them on AI 171 in the accident says that Air India stands in solidarity with the families and those affected and continues to fully cooperate with the AAIB and other authorities and their investigation progress. Given the active nature of the investigation, they're unable to comment on specific details and are referring all inquiries to AAIB. I mean, Isabel, as you said, the cockpit recording that was there, it is chilling. And what was asked was, why did you cut off the engines? The other denies it as well. We may never really get a clear answer to what went on in that cockpit. And I think for the families, that's truly harrowing to not know what happened.
Yeah, it just reminds me a little bit of the Lockerbie situation. People living in Britain will remember, and it's been recently dramatised and sort of brought back to reality how little we know all these years on, and that may well be the case with this as well. But I would add, we talk about, the developments in technology. It still astounds me that there aren't better ways of recording cockpit conversations, of black box recordings in the modern era, where it doesn't have to be retrieved from a crash site, but it is somehow recorded in real time, perhaps, whether it's in air traffic control or back at base. There shouldn't be the need for this sort of muffled, poor quality recordings that can ultimately tell us, what happened in these tragedies. Perhaps there are workarounds that I'm unaware of, but it seems crazy that we're trying to sort of look and listen out for whether or not somebody might have been depressed and whether they sounded alarmed enough or not. It seems an incredibly crude way to decide whether someone or not has been a mass murderer. It
does, and as you said, the black box has remained largely unchanged for many years. I can make a phone call on WhatsApp at 40,000 feet, yet the quality is lackluster at best, coming from the black box for the important stuff that's happening, including everything the pilots are saying and video footage of what's happening in the cockpit. Freddy, we know the crash happened at takeoff. We know that's a very critical phase of the flight as well. Are they currently training? Do you think they're currently safeguarding? Commercial airlines and pilots are trained enough to deal with situations like that? Because the landing gear, it never came up. And when we saw that video there, we know the pilots never lifted up the landing gear. So they may have been aware there was an issue incoming. They may have thought they could have landed that aircraft, but that was simply not true.
Well, yes, although I think in this case, the pilots were very experienced. They had a lot of hours flying on that particular aircraft between them. So I don't think it's a training issue in that case. There are other concerns about pilot training. There have been in America, and there's also been concerns about air traffic control in America. The Trump administration were very concerned after that terrible crash in the Potomac that air traffic control standards had slipped quite dramatically. And quite a lot of domestic flights have been delayed in America since that crash earlier this year. There are certainly, standards have to be incredibly high when it comes to air travel because the consequences are so obviously disastrous.
Freddy, Isabel, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story. The US Justice Department will meet with Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, in prison in the coming days. The announcement comes as pressure continues to mount on President Trump to release more of the Epstein Files that some MAGA members and Democrats believe could contain new evidence. The US president is currently in legal action with the Wall Street Journal after they linked him with the disgraced, now deceased, financer. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year federal prison sentence for her part in child sex trafficking, amongst other crimes. Freddie, this story really is not going away for the Trump administration. This meeting between Ghislaine Maxwell and the Deputy Attorney General, is it about justice, do you think, or is this some sort of a political optic that we're seeing play out?
I think there's quite a few things going on here. Yes, the Trump administration has got itself in a bit of a bind over the Epstein Files because, of course, they spent the election year, a lot of them who are now very senior in the administration, spent the last year and a bit actually calling for the Epstein Files to be released, for this client list to be released, to bring in the third parties who might be involved. And then they had this announcement saying, actually, there is no client list. Epstein operated pretty much alone. Of course, he didn't entirely operate alone, at least not according to the trial as we know it, the case as we know it. Ghislaine Maxwell is the only person serving time. And that's the other element of this story, which is that her family thinks she's been the victim of a terrible mistrial of justice and that she is effectively serving the sentence that should have been given to Epstein for all his crimes. Whether that's the case or not depends on how you look at this case. But certainly they think, Ghislaine Maxwell's family, think that her trial was very, very dodgy and was corrupted by the earlier trial of Jeffrey Epstein in 2007, where he actually got off the hook eventually. So there seems to have been some kind of Department of Justice mess up, big mess up, and an attempt to cover it up that has then lingered into pursuant cases. Whether that's what's going on here, and that's why the Department of Justice is still stonewalling on it, despite Donald Trump being in charge, is another matter. But you're certainly right to point towards the fact the Trump administration have got a real headache here because they don't quite know how to throw people off the scent because they put people onto the scent in the first place.
Well, Isabel, it begs the question, the Department of Justice now saying they're going to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell. And it just seems crazy to me that they haven't done this already. Why would they not have already had those conversations? She's been incarcerated for a number of years now on these charges. She's been found guilty, and she might have something to offer on this.
I mean, actually, if you just take a step back, it's all quite ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, when you hear Freddy saying there, you know, how they could sort of throw people off the scent, the MAGA troops off the scent with wanting to get to the bottom of this. Just show us the files, you know, tell us the truth. It comes back to the previous stories. Journalists, just show us what's out there. Go to court if you need to. Let's do things properly. I don't understand the secrecy, the keeping reporters away as if there's some sort of national threat if this information gets out. The idea that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to suddenly come cozy with the DOJ and give them information that they wouldn't have previously got is also ludicrous. Let's not forget this is a woman who had wrapped her mobile phone in foil and was evading arrest at the time that they finally caught up with her. Of course, she's going to be protesting her innocence, wanting a better deal out of this. Maybe that might be the outcome of this meeting with the DOJ. Will we get any further to knowing the truth? Probably not.
But do you think there's an incentive there? If Ghislaine Maxwell gets told, right, let's knock some time off this sentence, let's get you out, let's get you back into society once again, your life is never going to be the same, but give us the information that you know. Tell us something that's going to get another conviction in this case. There's surely an incentive there for her to do that. This lady wants out.
Possibly, yeah. We know that she doesn't like being in prison, having led this life of super luxury. And, you know, there is more evidence undoubtedly to be uncovered. I actually met somebody on Friday who claimed to be an Epstein victim. She's never reported it to the police. She's never gone to the authorities. But she said she was groomed by Ghislaine Maxwell. It was textbook. It happened here, actually, in the Shires around London. She was working in a health club and Ghislaine was a regular. According to her, and then she was sent through for massages to Epstein, and she managed to extricate herself from the situation, which lots of other women, particularly vulnerable women, were not able to do. So, you know, those are allegations, but they repeat the ones that we've heard multiple times. It certainly seems as though there's a pretty strong case against Ghislaine and Epstein, hence the convictions. I'd love to hear what she'd be able to say to get herself out of there any sooner.
Freddie, we're seeing something that the Trump administration is quite good at doing. It's not, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, because now we're hearing the Martin Luther King files have been released. So it's trying to maybe move some attention and shift it away from the Epstein files and their lack of release at the moment, and the DOJ is kind of held back on that. Is that very much what this administration is good at doing? Just distracting you while something else much bigger is going on underneath the covers?
Very much so, like a magician. All presidents actually do this, to be fair. They will say, look over here, when there's too much attention on something over there. I think with the FBI, it's particularly Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, who's very good at podcasting, doesn't seem to be quite so good at running a major federal agency. And he's realized that actually, you know, these cases are difficult, they're complicated. Sometimes you can't just release all the files because there's national security risks or whatever. With the MLK stuff, that is something they promised they'd do, and they have been doing, similar to the JFK assassination files and so on. I think the big distraction at the moment, one that Trump is very keen to do because he wants to throw this back in the face of the Democrats who are criticizing him over Epstein, is the Obama story. And we're hearing today that Donald Trump is saying, in fact, or strongly suggesting that he's going to pursue Barack Obama legally over his role in Russiagate, the attempt to suggest by the Democrats to suggest that Donald Trump was somehow a Russian asset in the 2016 elections. If Donald Trump does pursue Barack Obama through the courts, it's going to be very degrading to American democracy, you might say, but it will be a major, major story for the next couple of years.
Isabel, the DOJ is saying, well, the reason we're not releasing the files is partially to do with the victims, and we want to make sure the victims are protected more than anything else, more so than the perpetrators. And that is a concern for me. But what if these files get released and there's nothing in there? What if it's another JFK file release and there's really nothing of any merit in there at all? Do you think there's any likelihood of that?
Well, I just go back to, what I was hearing just a few days ago. It seems unlikely, but what do I know? If it is a balance that the DOJ are trying to strike between, any possible anonymity breaches for those victims and a possible, damp squib when it comes to revelations, then you can understand the decision. And, we have to trust in them. However, going back to the point that Freddy was making there, you've got a situation where you might see Obama going through the courts because of Russiagate in 2016, but you've got a president who pardoned himself for allegations that he was involved in electoral fraud himself. I mean, do we actually have any faith in the the judicial system in the United States, given how partisan it is, given that the president himself had multiple convictions with pretty decent evidence, I think most impartial punters would say, and he has managed to walk away without any more questions from it. So, it all leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I think it's going to be a story that rolls on for a long time now.
You're 100% correct, Isabel. And with Pam Bondi saying now that, look, we are going to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell in the coming days, this story, unfortunately for the Trump administration, as much as he wishes it was, is not going anywhere. Thank you both for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story. A new Elvis Experience in London has been criticised by fans who say it's the most misleading show that they've ever seen. It's called Elvis Evolution. It's an immersive concert that promised an AI experience and holographic projections of the music star. The tickets ranged from around £75 up as far as £300 for the pleasure. However, those attending have been left feeling conned and missold after the experience didn't quite meet their expectations. That may be an understatement. Isabel, we're seeing something here where the customer is always right, but is it acceptable when a show basically changed its concept? It said it was one thing. They announced this hologram and said it's going to be amazing, it's going to be immersive, you'll feel like Elvis is in the building. And now, instead, the end product did not match the hype at all. Do they deserve a refund?
Wouldn't you want one? I mean, it's false advertising, quite frankly. And, it's just like somebody's done some sloppy homework and handed it in. It's not good enough. I think if you promise something, you have to deliver. And we've talked a lot this evening about technology and how far along it is in 2025. You can pretty much magic up anything through AI. And this idea of a hologram doesn't sound incredibly difficult, but the accounts of people visiting the Excel Centre here in the UK have been saying that it looked like a GCSE, which is a sort of exam, a school exam piece of homework. It was so basic, and that you could have just watched the video on YouTube. But for some people, those tickets were £300. I mean, we're laughing about it, but it is actually a bit cheeky. I think it was organised by the estate of Elvis Presley. It sounds like they were just trying to make a fast buck for as little expense as possible.
I think there's a way to do this as well. Like Freddy, as Isabel rightly said, AI can upscale footage quality and make that genuine immersive experience. This effectively was clever marketing for a glorified documentary. So the reality versus the expectation were two wildly different things here.
Well, I saw someone on social media saying that it is actually quite authentic because it's what a hologram done in the time of Elvis Presley would have looked like because the technology is so bad. But I think, Yes, AI should be able. You should be able to magic up all sorts of entertainment now. But I just think it's sad that so much of our idea of entertainment, and I haven't seen this ABBA show that everybody says is apparently great, but so much of our entertainment is backward-looking and retrospective and sort of imaginary or immersive or fake, really. I just, I wish we had a few more shows that were just actual real performances.
Well,
called nostalgia, Freddy. People love to remember the good old days, and who can blame them when you look at the craziness going on around us? But don't forget.
Well, I feel nostalgic for a time when nostalgia wasn't the only thing in our cultural commentary.
No, but you say that. I mean, we had Taylor Swift visiting our shores here. She did her global tour. I mean, that was like the most successful tour of all time. It was huge. Pretty much everybody feels like went to see Taylor Swift. She's current. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, don't talk to me about Taylor Swift. It's traumatizing. My daughter went to that concert, and I didn't hear about anything else for a year and a half. So I'll give you Taylor Swift.
She was brainwashed, didn't you?
She's brainwashed. Totally brainwashed.
I went to that concert, and I can say that as a theatrical piece, the stage show and the everything that went on behind it is unlike anything else. From what I've seen from Elvis shows and any documentaries we've seen of them, it was quite literally just a man, a rather elderly, unhealthy man, standing on stage, holding a microphone, doing a rather lackluster performance in Circus in Las Vegas. So we've seen shows that claim to be similar to what is the real life experience. For instance, and I know, Isabel, like fans' expectations can be unrealistic sometimes, but the Willy Wonka experience that happened in the UK is another example of something that people signed up for one thing and got something that was totally different. Are creators genuinely trying to mislead people with this, with what they're selling? Or do you think mistakes happen and they have best interests at heart?
I don't think the Willy Wonka situation was a mistake. I think it was just, massively under budget and just overhyped. And, I think it sounds like the same situations happen with Elvis. I mean, Elvis fans are entitled to what they've been promised, surely, like we all are. I don't know why people can't be honest about what they're offering. Then there wouldn't be any problems.
Freddy, the only thing I can liken it to is ABBA-esque, the ABBA Voyage show that's on in the UK right now, which is sold out again and again, and it keeps getting extended as well. And people are paying big money for this as well, up to $500. It is an AI-powered concert. There is no live performance there at all. Would you pay it to go and see it?
I wouldn't, but that's because I'm an old curmudgeon. But my wife has gone to see it and said it was brilliant. And I know lots of people who've absolutely loved it. And I think with ABBA, you sort of can't really go wrong because the people who like it just love it. And the songs are replicable. And I don't know about the hologram technology, but I can see why people who like it want to go, but not for me.
Isabel, I guess the thing that we can take away from this is we can have holograms of artists who are alive, but what's the point? You can go and see them. But you can have holograms of artists who are no longer with us. We've just seen Ozzy Osbourne sadly passed away just as we began the show this evening. So someone like him, who has just finished up a show, which I am sure, if they've had their head screwed on properly, as it was his last show, they'll have done all of the groundwork to make sure that they can create an AI version of Ozzy Osbourne to come back as a hologram in the future. We can see artists who are sadly no longer with us on the stage. It's a good idea or it's a bad idea?
Well, firstly, can I say heartfelt, condolences to the Osbournes. Sharon Osbourne and Ozzy are sort of like institutions. Love them or loathe them. They're so well known. And, there's a family there grieving for someone. And 76, by the way, which is how old Ozzy Osbourne was, is no age in this day and age. But I know, obviously, he'd had a good time along the way. So perhaps it's a miracle he got to 76. But it's sad at its heart. And, if AI, if holograms or whatever can help people continue to feel whatever it was that star brought them, then, why not with Ozzy Osbourne? But I feel like it would be a bit more of a haunting than a feel good. Look, it's probably not the right day to be discussing that, but hey, I'm sure it might bring people comfort in due course if that is what you're into, Black Sabbath or whatever. Yeah,
I think so. Someone like Prince or that, if I could go and see a hologram of Prince, 100% I'd get behind something like that, I think. And finally, we'll move on to the part of the show where Freddy and Isabel have come up with some quirky stories of the day. Freddy, first we'll turn to you. The Venice Film Festival, the lineup's been announced, and we're going to get a first look at Jude Law playing Vladimir Putin.
Yes, well, it is actually quite extraordinary, I think, that they've chosen Jude Law, because I think facially he's a lot more handsome than Vladimir Putin ever was. And I've seen this, the image has gone around from a scene, and it just doesn't really look like Putin, despite the wonders of prosthetics and, balding effects and so on. I mean, good for Jude Law for taking this role on. I wouldn't like to portray Putin in a negative light in any film and then go anywhere near Russia, given Putin's track record. I do think that apparently this book, The Wizard of the Kremlin, is one of the... we reviewed it in The Spectator, and it got completely panned by our reviewer, Owen Matthews, who said it's one of the worst books he's ever read. And apparently the real tragedy of it is the history is so rich and interesting, and yet it's a fictionalized version of it. And the fiction has managed to make it far less interesting than the reality of Putin and Berezovsky and people like that. So, I think good luck to Jude Law. He's a very talented actor. But I'm not going to be queuing up to see this one either, I'm afraid.
So what are we going to be getting with this movie? Is it going to be a negative take on Putin, but also a fictionalized negative take? Is that what this story is?
Yes, well, it's fact and fiction melded together. So it's a fictional character who is an official inside the Kremlin, and there's a love story in there too. And it's supposed to be about the sort of the sweep of history and a kind of war and peace version in the 21st century. I mean, if going from what our reviewer said, the novel is very, very poor. So it's interesting it's been chosen for a film. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I'm not completely against it. I think, if Jude Law can act out as well as he did with the Pope, or he played Henry VIII very convincingly recently, it could be worth watching.
Let's see. Maybe one for next season. Isabel, you have got a story about the Chicago Scream Club. I'm intrigued, and I also want to go there. Tell us more.
Well, yes, this is something probably all of us could do with. This is a weekly meeting in Chicago, early in the morning, sort of daybreak, just before dawn, on the North Avenue Beach Pier, I believe, where a breathwork practitioner gathers a group of frustrated folk, and they write down all of their woes onto biodegradable paper, chuck it into the lake, and then they scream at the top of their voice. And this is supposed to be hugely therapeutic. And, it kind of chimes. There's lots of these sort of smash it up, anger release things now, aren't there? It's on the rage. And you know what? It actually is, on a serious note, symptomatic, I think, of the fact that as society we are probably moving too fast all the time, not necessarily connecting with nature, with the things that regulate us, with each other. We're so absorbed in our screens that people have all this pent-up frustration. People can't log off from work. They're checking work emails when they're in bed. There isn't that kind of human switch off anymore. So people just want to go and have a rage. I don't need it because I've got kids and it's the school holidays as well. So I do lots of screaming as it is. But you know what? I totally understand why there's a demand for it. I think, there's probably going to be more and more of these things. But can you imagine actually living or being on a pleasure boat or just living near the shores of the lake in Chicago and just hearing all these people screaming?
You're just trying to enjoy a nice casual cruise and then you're hearing screams. Would you do one of the smash rooms, which again is the same thing, but instead of being vocal about it, you're just taking out your anger and rage?
I mean, I'd do a smash room for sure. And I reckon my husband thinks I could sometimes definitely do with that. But I don't want to encourage my angry side. I think I need to just learn to be more chill. And, maybe that should be some people's approach rather than just smashing things up. I don't know. I
think, and as a grown adult man as well, sometimes it helps to have a bit of a cry. Freddie, I'm sure you can resonate with that. Having the kids off school as well at the moment and being there in the Isle of Wight, I'm sure you can feel me on that.
I've felt like weeping several times today.
And several times again tomorrow. Well, I want to thank both of our guests for today. Freddie Gray, the deputy editor of Spectator in Isle of Wight. Isle of Wight, was it, Freddie, you're in today?
Isle of Wight, yeah.
Thank you very much. And broadcaster and journalist Isabel Webster. Thank you both very much for joining us. That's all from us on W News Extra. Of course, as always, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. As always, you can follow us on X. GNT with Micheál Prendergast is on the way next. Goodbye.